Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Positive Club. Today I have with me one of the very interesting gentlemen by name of Jeremy. I met Jeremy at a protest and we've been friends since then. And today we are going to talk about, his life story because it's very inspiring. Jeremy, welcome to the Positive Club. How are you doing, sir?
Yes, hi, I'm Jeremy Gustafson. Originally from Vancouver Island, third generation British Columbia resident, and now I'm residing in the Cariboo. And quite happy to be here. Certainly the most snow I've ever seen in my life, but I was ready for that. And as I've told my friends back down on the coast, it beats the rain. I think
anything beats the rain.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate that. I know we had a real bad cold snap here in December, down to minus 36 or something, which was quite interesting to me because I thought that was like what it was like every winter here. And I thought, wow, this will take some getting used to. But now that I've talked to enough friends and coworkers and neighbors, I hear that was actually quite an extraordinary winter. People say they haven't seen that sort of cold since the 1970s, which is great for me because now every winter is going to be more relaxing and easier to deal with than this winter was.
Tell me about your life a little bit, your childhood, and then a little bit about, you were in the film industry.
I had three main careers in life. I said I grew up on Vancouver Island. I grew up about 10 miles south of a town called Campbell River. It's also in the middle of the island. I always seem to end up in the center of places. And so very rural upbringing. I mean, technically we weren't rural like I'm rural living now, but we were at the end of a gravel road off the highway, chickens in the backyard, heating our house with wood. My father had been a lumberjack until he was in a car accident that wrecked his foot, and then he became a fisherman. There's just me and my sister, and that made me the default deckhand on the fishing boat. So that was my first career, commercial fishing. I started that at the age of 14. Commercial fishing experience was my in to get into the film industry, just because there's a lot of technicians carrying a lot of heavy equipment around, and one skill in my department, the grip department, is you have to know how to tie knots. And that's one thing fishermen know how to do, is how to tie knots. Once I was done with fishing, I tried a couple of years of college. It just wasn't a good fit. I needed to get out and see the world. Certainly, I'll date myself. I graduated from public school in 1984, went to UBC the next year, thought I was going to be a doctor. In retrospect, it's just, I wanted to check out the big city. And so I pretty much stopped going to classes. This is not an inspirational message to the children, but I stopped going to classes. I had a summer job working in a mine because, of course, once you go to college, your 2-month summer vacation is a 4-month summer vacation. So I needed to fill 2 months before fishing. And while I was working in the mine, the mill of the mine, I wasn't actually underground, I met a fella that from Edmonton that was going on an overseas trip to Europe. And out of the blue, he asked me to come with him. And so that was one of the defining moments of my life. I spent 8 months backpacking around Europe and the Middle East. This would have been in 1985, 1986.
What are some of the experiences you had?
In Europe, we sort of did a whirlwind tour. I regretted a little. We had a 2-month Eurail pass. And of course, we were 19-year-old boys. So we were doing a lot of drinking, to tell you the truth. Spend the night in a youth hostel, get up in the morning, hop on the train. So, I saw one night in Copenhagen, one night in Stockholm, one night in Helsinki. Germany, we slowed down because my buddy I was traveling with had some German relatives. So Germany, we saw quite a bit of. One of the highlights there is the Berlin Wall was still up. So, went through Checkpoint Charlie, saw the difference between East Berlin and West Berlin. And the differences were striking, I have to say, right? East Berlin, the communist side, that was still full-on East German secret police and all that. Very gray, very depressing. You get into West Berlin and it's exciting times. It was like Las Vegas, I guess, or something like that. That was the first little hint of maybe communism is not the best way to go for me. Our train pass ran out in Greece, and we ended up spending Christmas in a cave on the island of Crete. And then our next plan was we wanted to go overland to India. We got to Turkey, which at the time was my favorite country, I have to say. It was such an interesting slightly westernized, but still a lot of Islamic influence. So you had all the architecture and all the guys with the tea and the carpets. Istanbul is an amazing city. It was so enormous.
So tell me some of the most exciting things that you experienced, some stuff that you learned on your journey.
Certainly seeing the pyramids is probably number one. I mean, being on the kibbutz in Israel, we stayed there for 2 months. If you don't know, a kibbutz is like a commune type situation. Everyone that lives on the kibbutz, they don't get a wage, but they have farm products. So you all work, you have no need of money. Traveled all through Europe on trains, which is, if you have, I don't know, maybe lots of people have been on trains, but I hadn't, and it's an amazing way to travel. You kick back, you watch the countryside unfold. So if you ever have a chance to take a big train trip, I'd recommend that to people. Yeah, it was an 8-month trip, a lot to digest. And the funniest thing for me was when I finally got back to small town Campbell River, after seeing all this stuff, and you get back to your hometown and nothing has changed. It's like your whole 8-month trip was almost just like a dream, you know? Even the same rocks are on the side, on the side of the road walking home. It's like, wow. But that really changed me, changed my impression, and got a real travel bug. So I've seen quite a few countries over the years since then.
When you go traveling to different countries, different cities, you see things from a different point of view, from different perspective, and it changes you. You know, it makes you a better person.
Back in the mid '80s is when Ireland was having all their troubles with the IRA and the car bombs. And that stuck in my mind because the media in Canada, it just seemed like Ireland was going to be a full-on war zone. And that was one of the cities we visited was Belfast. And my friend and I were a little nervous going, we're going to get shot, we're going to get blown up. And we get to Belfast, and other than a little bit of barbed wire we saw on one brick wall, there was a radio station like playing music, people dancing in the street and having a good time, and there was no sign of any strife at all. And I thought, well, that's sort of odd, because that's not how the media presented this. And I'd wanted to be an actor for years. That was that was my main hobby in high school, was the theater club and such, because my school was too small to actually have acting classes. We just did that extracurricularly. So when I went back to college, I started with English. I flipped into theater, did a couple of musicals, and then I decided I wanted to get into real acting school in Vancouver. And I applied, but the woman doing the admissions got sick for like 6 months. So I needed to get a job in the meantime. And I had an aunt that was working in a small BC casino in Nanaimo, and the one in Victoria was hiring. So you start in a casino, you take a blackjack course and become a blackjack dealer. I never did go to school. I ended up working in the casino for 5 years in Victoria. And then a bunch of my coworkers, the new trendy thing for dealers to do was to go work on cruise ships. So I did that. Gave me a chance to travel and live for free. So spent 8 months 5 months in the Caribbean, 3 months doing the Vancouver to Alaska run, working on a cruise ship, which again was quite interesting. People, oh, cruise ship sounds like fun, But the one thing with a cruise ship is you work for 8 months, no days off. Yeah, when the cruise ship finished, I got off the ship in Vancouver, and that's how I ultimately moved over to Vancouver. And then it was tough to get a job in a new city. I was DJing weddings and working at a graveyard shift in a cafe. And then I started seeing some film sets popping up. So I began working as a background extra. And being a big, tall, white, bald guy, I got cast as a cop a lot, which I thought was awfully funny. But I started noticing, the crew members got to eat ahead of the background extras, and it seemed better. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try this for a new industry. Grabbed a handful of applications, and I've been on sets a few times, so I don't know much about electricity. I wasn't going to be an electrician. And I was always interested in sound, being a wedding DJ, but I didn't know on a movie set, there's only 2 guys in the sound department, so not a lot of jobs available there. And I saw grip, and it was talking about rigging and turnbuckles and know how to tie a clove hitch in a bowline. And I thought, well, this I know. So not really knowing much else about what grips do, I did that. But again, it was a struggle. It's a challenge. It's a highly competitive industry. It turned out the year I started, 2000, just was an extra busy year. So I got 6 months of work in that year. I thought, well, this is great, easy peasy. But then the next 2 years, I only got 4 months of work, and you don't get 4 months all at once. You get like a week here, then someone with more seniority comes and you're out, couple days here, couple days there. And the only problem is the 8 months you're not working, you pretty much have to be home sitting by the phone. Most of the work in Vancouver, any Canadian-made productions are always done in Toronto. All the work in Vancouver is basically we're a service industry for Los Angeles. So making all these, sorry to be blunt, but crappy superhero shows I would never watch, but I ain't getting paid to watch them, I'm getting paid to make them.
Have you watched any of the Avengers films? You haven't.
I've seen some of them, I guess the one I watched the whole season of, there was a show called Riverdale. My boss and I got hired for season 2, so I thought, well, I better get season 1, I'll watch that and see what it's about. But again, from a technician's point of view, when you're watching it, all I saw was outside in the rain, outside in the rain, outside at night, outside in the rain, outside in the snow. So I did that for 22 years. And I just had enough. The big city has gone spiraling downhill more and more and more. So
tell me about your childhood a little bit. Tell me some of the struggles in your childhood and how you surpassed them and overcome them.
I was a result of a high school pregnancy. So part of my dad has always resented me for being born. And that's not uncommon. So I guess my biggest challenge I had to overcome is the whole time I grew up, I was constant disapproval, right? And I realize now it doesn't matter because like I said, I was into theater, I like to read, I didn't like sports. So of course, as a lumberjack fisherman father. That's unacceptable. I used to get kicked out of the house when I was reading, go outside and play. So I would just go outside and kick rocks until I could come back in and do what I love, which was to read lots of books. In a way, I feel adversity makes you stronger. So, I mean, I've never been married, never had kids. So I don't know, maybe that's a negative effect. Some people have a hard time understanding that, but basically the word family does not give me happy memories. And I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not saying feel sorry for me. I just basically say it so people will feel at ease that I'm not married, because some people find that quite disturbing, oddly enough.
Well, not everything works perfectly for everybody. Some people like to be free and enjoy their life and learn. And I think, family and kids and all that stuff is beautiful. You learn a lot. But when you go out there and you experience everything by yourself, you learn so much more. And then, for people that go through all this stuff in their childhood, they need to heal, right? So there's a very long healing process from all this crap that you have to go through.
I think one of my earliest report cards from elementary school, and 7 or 8 years old, and the teacher's comment was, I'm too independent. I mean, that's one thing I've always been, is very, very independent.
Yeah, it's dangerous. If you're independent, you're not good, because nobody can control you, right?
Well, that's sort of where I'm at now. That's why I never got vaccinated, for COVID, quote, a vaccine, quote unquote. If they'd done the soft sell and said, hey, why don't you try doing this? But as soon as someone says, you must do this, even if it's a huge advantage to me to do it, I just rebel. I can't help myself. So don't tell me what to do. I make up my own mind.
I don't think anybody should tell anybody what to do, right? They should give you the option for whatever you want to do. You do it, good for you. You don't do it, good for you.
I don't want to be a hypocrite. So I don't want to be told what to do, so I'm not going to tell you what to do. Like, I've been to real communist countries, and people want out. That was the thing with the kibbutz in Israel. It's sort of the utopian fantasy, right? You don't need money. All your meals are provided for you. Your kids are educated. But the problem with that is, I don't know what it is about human nature, but people need motivation. And on that kibbutz, no one was motivated. Everyone did the minimum they could. Because why would you work twice as hard as the next guy when you're not going to get any benefit out of it? They would have like 2 guys that were the real go-getters, and everyone else did the minimum they could. And for the jobs that nobody wanted to do, they would bring on volunteers from other countries.
There is this fake notion that competition is bad. I think competition is one of the best things, because then every business tries 10 times harder. And when they have a product, they keep increasing the quality of the product and they compete with each other. So things always evolve. But when there's no competition and there's no motivation and there's no reward for the hard work that you put in,
no reward,
the whole thing falls apart, right? It's like rice. You cook a rice in a certain way, it's nice and firm. But if you just put too much water, it becomes mush, right? And I think this is what's happening in some places.
Sorry, my cats are rustling around in the background. As independent as I was, I had a mouse infestation, so I had to get cats. So I've always been more of a dog person. But I guess most people would want to know how I ended up living in Horsefly.
Yeah, you went from Vancouver all the way to Horsefly. This is like a huge change. Why?
It was a big change, especially because I knew nobody up here. I mean, I would have probably gone back to Vancouver Island, but it's just far too expensive for me. It's got the same problem as Vancouver, right? It's just ridiculous. What I got up here for under 500 grand in Vancouver Island would probably cost me $1.5 million. And my first trip to the Caribou, there's something appealed to me about it. Just little details, like the speed limit goes up another 10 kilometers an hour on the highway, the freeway, as soon as you enter here. And one of my friend down in Canham Lake, one of the pieces of advice he gave me is in the Caribou, they said if the gates open, come in for a visit. If the gates close, don't come in. That's sort of the rule up here. I thought I liked that. I like that place.
In Vancouver, everybody becomes part of small groups.
I always heard from other people that had moved from Ontario, Vancouver's very unfriendly, but I hadn't really been to any other big Canadian city, so I didn't know until I walked into a bar in Toronto and everyone was so friendly there. And I thought, wow, I guess Vancouver really is unfriendly.
I moved from Vancouver, I went to Halifax. And I couldn't believe how nice these people, some of the most beautiful human beings I've seen in my life, they were in Halifax.
I got lucky. I got a cheap condo in Vancouver just because the neighborhood was still very downtown east side-ish. I never thought I was going to be able to buy a place, but film industry does pay well. That's one payoff for doing the long hours. It's lots of overtime. And then so once I actually I can't say my dream of owning a condo because it was never a dream. I just thought it was never going to be a reality. But once I actually owned a little place to live, I started wanting more, right? You want to have a piece of land now. You know, there's always been a little bit of political unrest, right versus left here, and I sort of thought it's going to end up with anarchy. And I thought when that happens, I'm heading for the hills, because sure, I've been living in the big city for years, but I know how to swing an axe. I know how to run a chainsaw. And yeah, it turned out what it was COVID chased me away. The film industry was sort of ground zero for that. Wearing the mask 12 hours a day. Now I'm outside on a rainy beach carrying a 12-step ladder on my shoulder, wearing a face mask. I had to get my nose swabbed 3 times a week for 8 months. COVID compliance officers following you around. You guys aren't 6 feet apart. Your mask is too low. And I thought, I gotta get out of here, because now this is a funny thing. I figured they were gonna make me get mandatory vaccinations to work. I had no idea that was going to spread to all of society.
All of the world.
Just started now. I've seen in the newsletter that some productions are insisting that you're going to have to get vaccinated. But yeah, so I'm glad I got out when I did. People are fleeing Vancouver like crazy. This place is probably that I'm in now would probably be another $100,000, not even a year later, because everyone's escaping. So
it's going to raise the price everywhere. Everywhere the price is going up like crazy.
No, I'm certainly guilty of that for all my new fellow neighbors in the Caribou, right? I'm one of the city guys that took the money and headed for the hills.
Are you taking a cut here or something like that? Are you getting paid, for advertising of the place?
Yes, welcome to the Caribou. There's like little clues in life. The one year I mentioned I went to UBC for a year, and I was staying in student residence, and the towers that were the student residences were all named after areas in British Columbia. There's the University of British Columbia, right? And the house I was in was called Caribou House.
Oh, wow.
Way back in 1985. I didn't even know where the Caribou was back then. And now years later, I didn't even remember till I actually moved in here. It's like, holy smokes, that's a funny coincidence. I just sort of follow the path of least resistance in life. I mean, sometimes I've had some setbacks. Like certainly the first 2 years in Vancouver is the most broke I've ever been. I had such trouble finding a job, but I just try to look for signs from life or signs from God, whichever your perspective is. And you just try to make the right decisions.
You live so far away, and then you're also a party member of the PPC. So why did you join that group? What makes you actually wanted to run for politics, in the first place? Because, it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Well, that was part of my thing with independent and not having a family, is I didn't really have anyone to embarrass. And the first time I entered politics was in 2013. And I got very upset at Christy Clark with some of her lies and deceit. I can actually remember the exact moment. She was promising a $100 billion prosperity fund from the LNG industry, even though there was zero LNG industry. There wasn't even a shovel in the ground. And that was it for me. I'm like, this is nuts. So I just Googled, how do you run as an MLA? So that was my first experience in politics. And I basically did it just to make a mockery of the system, because I'm a smooth talker and I'm a good public speaker. And so, I just all by myself, team of one, no help from anybody. And another thing I was trying to prove is that you don't need a lot of money. So I gave myself a budget of $400 and I ran as an independent MLA. And I was printing up my own leaflets and cutting them up and standing with my bicycle. Another thing I was trying to target was non-voters, because that was another huge frustration to me, especially at the provincial level of politics. You get a 50% voter turnout, but 100% of people like to complain about politics. And I was still online, still watching things, and I saw a story about an MP. They were accusing him of hate speech. And at that time, hate speech was just, anything was hate speech now. I thought, okay, what's hate speech today? Who is this guy? Maxime Bernier. Who's this guy? Never heard of him. And what he's saying is that we need to have fewer immigrants. And I thought, well, how is that hate speech? I could see that being controversial. But what are you talking about, Australians? No, we're not specifying. We want fewer black immigrants. We want fewer brown immigrants. Just fewer immigrants. So I thought, well, I'm going to keep an eye on this guy, because I can't believe an actual elected official would dare incur the wrath of the media like this. This guy obviously doesn't care. He wants to just speak his mind. And the next thing you know, he forms a political party. And at the time, I was upset at Stephen Harper because I thought he sold us out to China, which arguably he did. And I was, even though I'd voted for Trudeau, because I thought he was going to defend my free speech. But anyway, I thought Bernier's formed his own. Know this guy, I'm going to vote for Bernier. And of course, my very next thought is, don't be an idiot. You're not going to vote for someone you don't know anything about. So I read the platform that they had up, which was basically the platform he ran for leader of the Conservative Party on. And I thought, holy smokes. Like of all my little grassroots parties and any major parties I've supported, this is the first platform I've seen I can back 100% all the way. I like that. I became a founding member of the party, PPC. And with my casino background, I'm got a good head with numbers. So I just signed on to be the financial agent in East Van. I wasn't going to be a candidate again. And then the first hurdle came up in 2019. They weren't going to let Bernier into the national debates unless we had whatever it was, 288 candidates, I think, something like that. So the call came out for candidates. So I volunteered for that. And they shipped me over to Vancouver Island, satellite candidate. But I didn't think that was that much of a stretch because I was born and raised there, third generation Vancouver Islander. And yeah, it was not a very positive reception. So I was getting all the Nazi and fascist. And I even went to one of the all candidates meetings, and the local Communist Party guy had a bunch of people with picket signs protesting me, which backfired on them because they didn't hurt my feelings. And I just got a selfie taken with them in the background.
When you were running for the PPC candidate here, tell me some of the experiences.
You know, in retrospect, it probably wasn't the best idea because I'd only been living here 2 months. It was just I needed a lot of work on the house. One thing I didn't realize is geographically how immense this riding is. Certainly anyone that wanted to volunteer with me was all in Prince George. And it was a new house. I got 2 new kittens I just got. I couldn't abandon them. So doing weekly drives up to Prince George, which showed up here in a 1-ton pickup. That got a little pricey, to tell you the truth.
So how much of your money did you put in this? You did a lot of it from your money, right?
Yeah, I started off, I mean, when all settled down, about $5,000, which is about the minimum they expect you. That's one thing people don't know is each riding is on their own. You don't get any money from back east from the PPC head office. They expect you to do all the fundraising. If you're a candidate, you should put up your own money. They don't give you a sign. They don't give you anything. That's just the way it is. And that's not just the PPC. That's all parties, right? I really had nothing. For the first 3 weeks, it was just me because nobody knows me, right? One of my favorite things about the PPC is we don't change our platform. Here it is. You don't like it, vote for someone else. That's your right. But we're not going to fall victim to some special interest group that wants us to, raise immigration level, for instance. I should mention that because that's the biggest thing that we get tarred as being racist because we want lower immigration. But unemployment is high. Housing is unaffordable. You want to bring in more people. We brought in like 400,000 people. Apparently a lot of those were here already. But people are coming here to have a better life, not to have to work 3 jobs to just pay rent on a tiny apartment that isn't big enough for their family, you know? So yeah, it's a tougher decision, you know? Oh, you got such a big country, you got all this room, but a lot of this country is uninhabitable.
So cold.
Yeah, so cold. Or you get to the coast, if I drove straight west from here to the coast right now in the winter, the winds, the rain, it's almost worse than the snow in that here, really.
And nobody realizes that, every human being, they have the same goals. They want freedom, they want to be loved, and they want to take care of their family, and they want to have a good job. And then a lot of people, they don't take self-responsibility. How can you expect change if you're not going to take self-responsibility? Every individual is responsible for making a difference. But people, they just want to talk, and they want to point finger, and they don't want to do anything. It's like a blaming game.
Personal responsibility. You make bad choices sometimes. That's your fault. I mean, recover. I got a very good friend of mine, but we don't really see eye to eye anymore because it's, for some reason, he will not accept the fact that the mainstream media, at very best, twist the truth. I mean, especially as we've seen with this truckers convoy, they're not even twisting the truth. They're just straight out lying now because they can get away with it.
A lot of businesses, they went bankrupt. A lot of people lost their livelihood. This is insane what has happened because of these 2 years lockdown, right? You cannot do anything.
Yeah.
Give a couple of advice about life that you experienced.
Decisions in life. It's just decisions that aren't the best decision. And, so instead of a goal you have, instead of it taking 6 months, it might take 3 years. Like, instead of wrong decisions, think of it as detours from the true path you're on. So don't give up hope. I mean, certainly when I was living in Vancouver, my first 6 months there, and I couldn't find a job and everything just ended up, and I certainly felt despair. But you persevere, just get up and keep trying, and things will eventually work out.
The thing is, people give up too fast.
Yeah. Actually, I remember, because to tell you the truth, we were pretty rowdy that 8 months I spent on the cruise ship. A lot of partying. And didn't save any money. And it was about 8 months in when I was living in Vancouver, 8 months of not being able to find a job, 8 months of being so broke. And at just about the 8-month mark, I realized, holy smokes, the whole time I sort of wasted 8 months being a partying idiot on the cruise ship. That was 8 months. And now I've had 8 months of poverty. I wonder if that's connected. And as soon as I made that realization, I got a job. So coincidence? So maybe there's that lesson. Even if you are a bit of an idiot in life, it might take you a few months to repay your karma or whatever it is. But again, don't give up. Things seem pretty dark in this country right now. We got some serious division going on. Don't give up. You feel what you're doing is right. You're not harming anyone else. Life should work out for you. But don't give up. Don't sit around feeling sorry for yourself. That doesn't help. Don't blame others.
Jeremy, thank you very much for coming on the Positive Club. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for all the inspirational stories that you shared.
Hey, great. I was real happy to be here. I feel a little awkward talking about myself, but if I could inspire anyone to make their life a little happier with some of the crazy stories of things I've done, I think I've done a good job. So thank you very much for the invitation. Good evening to everybody.
Thank you very much.